Yo, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I want to show you guys what is, in my opinion, the strongest version of a Lightning Spear Stormlance build, and we are taking this build and we are moving it over now onto a new ascendancy, and that is the Invoker. I already made a build guide about the Amazon, and although the Amazon is very strong and has a lot of high value ascendancy points, which are very effective when starting out. It cannot scale the damage nearly as efficiently here as the Invoker. The Invoker has some angles here to scale the damage much higher than the Amazon can. And so I moved on to this, and this is, in my opinion, the best version. This is a end game, ultra end game, like very, geared to the teeth build here. So just keep that in mind as a disclaimer. This is not a character you're going to be able to set up very easily when starting out. This is something you transition to after you're done with your Amazon and you want to push for more damage. This character does like roughly triple the damage of my Amazon, which allows me, instead of killing a tier 4 pinnacle in like 15 seconds, I can kill them in like 4 or 5 seconds, which is absurd. And the mapping is also great because we're able to make use of Herald of Ice, which is big AoE explosions when we kill enemies, and that helps with the map clear a lot. The only trade-off here between the Amazon and the Invoker here is that the Amazon is able to get Leech, and Leech feels really nice for mapping, whereas the Invoker is just going to have to make use of a Flask, which can be a little annoying. But as far as bossing potential goes, this is far superior than Amazon. Mapping might be just slightly worse than Amazon just because of no Leech, but there are ways around it, and you can still get by, especially if you have stuff like this Orlos Resolve, which helps a lot with giving us some extra guard to protect us, since we're not going to have that Leech. Now, let me go over the Ascendancy, which is the most important, and the reasons why I chose this over other Ascendancies out there. I know people are playing Deadeye with Lightning Spear, and that's also very strong. The Deadeye has some benefits with the Frenzy charges, which allows it to do more damage with Lightning Spear, and then is able to use a really powerful Wind Serpent's Fury with the double charge effect and almost one-shot pinnacle bosses, which is crazy. But here on the Invoker, we are choosing to continue with Stormlance. This is kind of my favorite skill in the game right now. It's very straightforward. You just spam it and kill stuff. Bosses die in a few seconds here with this skill. And it's very easy to use. You don't have to build up any charges or anything. The charges will be built up on their own here by cast on critical. So it's a very easy one-button playstyle. And, the difference between this and Deadeye would be the Deadeye would have to build up their charges, use a Wind Serpent's Fury, and then build up their charges again to get another Wind Serpent's Fury. And then maybe there's a chance they could kill the boss in 2 of those Wind Serpent's Fury. Assuming they're on a very high budget and they're, using like a couple hundred divines worth of gear. But this Invoker here probably is cheaper to get similar kill time, simply because you don't need to deal with all that charge generation before and during the fight. You just stand there and hold down one button, or just click one button, and the boss will die in like 4 or 5 seconds. So yeah, very powerful for bossing. Mapping is going to be a little worse than the Amazon, because the difference between one-shotting everything and one-shotting everything, there's no difference there, right? So even on my Amazon, I was one-shotting everything in maps, but I had the upside of the Leech to keep me alive. Whereas here on the Invoker, we're still one-shotting everything in maps, and we have maybe a little bit of better AoE clear with Herald of Ice, but the recovery is worse, so those stray bullets and stray arrows and stuff that hit you are going to stick a little harder. And there are ways around this. So one of the most lethal things in the game right now is actually stun and ailments and stuff. Especially if you're playing a build that is high energy shield but doesn't have a lot of life, because your ailment and your stun threshold is based on your life. And the way to fix that is to take some points on the tree. So if you were to map on a character like this, I would recommend taking Deft Recovery and probably these points up here that convert a portion of your energy shield into stun threshold and ailment threshold. And so for those 7 points, you would basically take out some of the bossing points here, like the stand and deliver and frazzled. These are really only giving you a ton of damage on bosses, because this is when you're standing within 2 meters, which is on bosses. And shock is only good on bosses because we're actually hitting them after we apply a shock, whereas in maps, we're one-shotting everything, and so we're not getting much value out of the shock anyway. So at that point, you might as well go for the extra stun and ailment threshold. So that's what I recommend if you want to play the Invoker in maps, to do that little bit of a swap. But when going into a boss fight, you're going to want this extra damage, and that is where ailment and stun threshold is not as important. You can get by with just charms to deal with the ailments, because the boss will not be applying them too often, and then you can just kill the boss as fast as possible. So let's start off by going over the Ascendancy and why I chose it and why it's so powerful. So the first thing to note here is that Lead Me Through Grace did get a slight nerf from last league, but it is still probably one of the most powerful ascendancies in the game. simply because you can get all the spirit you need on a character to run a bunch of different auras without having to get spirit on your gear. Normally on like an Amazon or a Deadeye, you'd have to get a spirit mod on your body armor, a spirit corruption on your helmet, use an amulet that has spirit, and then maybe find other ways to get more spirit as well to get enough spirit. In this case here on the Invoker, all we need is a really good body armor, and that is going to give us all the spirit we want to have. And then that spirit will be converted into damage here with the threaded light. This converts a portion of our spirit into spell damage, and then with this helmet is converting that spell damage into attack damage. So by getting a bunch of spirit, we're actually getting a ton of attack damage, basically for free, for just having this ascendancy and having a pretty good body armor. Now there are ways to scale this even further, because this ascendancy prevents you from gaining spirit from equipment, but you can use spirit from jewels. So we have a Against the Darkness here, which is giving me another 33 spirit. And I'm able to be here on my build at a total of 260 spirit without the downside of, again, having to put spirit on my gear and, cutting into my defenses on my body armor. And I don't even have to buy a spirit corrupted helmet, which are normally pretty expensive. I could just buy one with a bunch of energy shield instead if I want. And we don't even need a spirit amulet. We can use this amulet, which is guaranteed to double your damage with Stormlance. And also make mapping feel a lot more comfortable because we're going to have a lot more charges. This will give you 2 charges every time you gain a charge. And it also has a pretty good stat line of giving you a bunch of attributes, which we need in this build, and a bunch of chaos res, which is also nice to hit near chaos cap. I am currently sitting with res cap as well as 66 chaos. And this is not completely perfect. I do need to replace this belt and get one that has more energy shield instead of lightning res. I do not need the lightning res. And then I'd probably be over 5,000 energy shield. So you can get a big defensive layer, a big hit pool of like 1.3k life and like over 5,000 energy shield. So you're not going to be getting one shot by almost anything, including pinnacle bosses. You can tank almost anything you want. And on top of that, your damage is just absurd with this spirit scaling. Now moving on to the next thing that scales our damage immensely and is something we can really only do here on the Invoker is Trinity. So Trinity, the way it works is when you do damage of a certain type, it will give you, and that is the highest type. So for example, if you do a high hit of lightning, it'll give you 10 lightning resonance and it'll remove 2 cold and 2 fire resonance. So the way that you get all 3 elements built up to the maximum resonance is you need to be alternating the damage that is the highest. So a big fire hit, a big cold hit, then a big lightning hit, and repeat, and so on. So you want to have all your damage be balanced. And as you can see here on my Stormlance, on the detonation here, the damage is fairly balanced. I have, around 2 to 5.7k, 2 to 5.6k, 2 to 5.9k. All the damage from all the 3 elements is very balanced. And the way that we can achieve that is with these gloves here. These will convert all your elemental damage equally into the 3 different elements, as well as giving you a bunch of damage as extra of those elements. And this is allowing us to make really good use of Trinity and get the total of 78% more elemental damage with pretty much 100% uptime while mapping. And then on bosses, this builds up really quickly within a couple seconds. And so you're getting 78% more elemental damage, which is just insane. Now, on other ascendancies, the problem with this is you need penetration of equal types. You need, 75 cold, lightning, and fire penetration if you want to be doing equal damage to these bosses, these pinnacle bosses. Otherwise, they're going to resist your, damage that you don't have penetration for, and you're not going to be getting resonance of that type. So again, Invoker Ascendancy is coming in clutch here with this point here, allowing our critical hits to ignore non-negative enemy monster elemental resistances, meaning that all the damage we're doing, fire, cold, and lightning, is all doing equal damage and building up that Trinity, as well as we have as much penetration as you could possibly need, and we are ignoring all their resistances with just 1 point on the tree because we are, or 1 point on the Ascendancy because we are crit capped here with the Tangled Tongue giving us so much crit. So we're able to be crit capped, have all the pen we need, build up Trinity, and get 78% more elemental damage. Now there's another upside of doing this, and using these gloves, and that is that we are now able to shock, freeze, and ignite. We can do all 3 ailments, and that is really powerful when combined with these points up here: Echoing Frost, Echoing Thunder, and Echoing Flames. This section here, just from these like 5 points or 6 points, is giving a total of, I think it's like 120% increased elemental damage, which again is an insane amount to get, and this has like pretty much 100% uptime as well. Now, beyond that, we can also freeze. So that is an added defensive layer for fighting bosses as well as in maps. And that allows us to use stuff like Herald of Ice, which in my opinion is probably the best Herald in the game still. since the radiuses and the radiuses on all the heralds got nerfed this patch. But Herald of Thunder or Herald of Ice here with Reach and Magnified Effect can still have a pretty significant AoE, allowing it to give you a lot of shotgunning and really good improved map clearing. So very powerful Herald. It's the best Herald remaining, and we are able to freeze in this build, allowing us to use a full power version of this. And we don't even need to use a Herald of Thunder with Electrocute and Primed for Neural Overload to generate a Frenzy charge from Combat Frenzy, because we're freezing enemies. So Combat Frenzy is either freeze or Electrocute or pin, and because we're freezing, we're getting Frenzy charges while mapping from just freezing, and we can use a full power Herald, which is really good for map clear. So the map clear on is better than Amazon. The bossing is better than Amazon. The only thing that's slightly worse is the recovery, but that's okay. As long as you're playing a little bit back, you're not running straight into the enemies, you should be fine. So let's go over the other last two ascendancy points here. And that is, I'm the Blizzard and I'm the Thunder, giving us 10% damage extra, cold and lightning, also giving us some nice effects like shocked and chilled ground. And this pairs really well at getting more damage. And then if you use it alongside the Against the Darkness, which you can get damage as extra fire, you're able to still keep your damage types kind of balanced here. I'm getting 12% extra fire and then 10% lightning and cold here from the Ascendancy, keeping my elements fairly balanced, which is what we want for Trinity uptime. And so that is the ideal kind of setup here for that. And so paired with Spirit stacking with these two uniques and using a full power Trinity and getting all the penetration we need, this is why the Invoker can scale his damage far beyond what the Amazon could. Now there are some ways to try and make this kind of work on the Amazon. You'd have to use Painter Servant Gloves and the Aziz Amulet, the Beacon of Aziz Amulet, which ignores all resistances when you crit. And that can sort of work, but then you would also need to get a bunch more Spirit on your body armor and probably a Spirit Corruption on your helmet as well to make good use of these uniques. So it is more expensive to go that route, and you lose this amazing amulet, which, like I've said, is guaranteed to double your damage, and the Beacon of Aziz will not be able to do that. So I think the Invoker Ascendancy is probably the supreme ascendancy here for a Stormlance build that can just, melt through bosses in seconds. So let me go over the gear, and like I said, this is a very endgame build. So here I have a 24.5% crit chance Tangle Tongue with 2 sockets. These two crit damage runes are very important. This is adding to your base crit damage, so this is a number that is going to be getting multiplied by all your increases to crit damage on your skill tree. And so we want, we really want to have 2 sockets here and have enough crit to reach our crit cap. It's nice, though, that the Invoker starts in this area here because there are some really good crit chance points here and here, which allows us to hit crit cap relatively easily. Even without needing the Amazon Ascendancy to convert our accuracy into crit chance, we're still able to crit cap relatively easily, which is nice. Moving on to the helmet and the shield, like I said, this is what's giving us that damage, attack damage from our Spirit. And basically, you just want the best you can get here on the increased spell damage per 10 Spirit. It rolls all the way up to 15%, but it's not a huge difference between 14 and 15, so I just went for 14. It was way cheaper. And for the helmet, we don't really need anything special on it. Just any helmet with decent amount of attributes and energy shield will be fine. The amulet, we're allocating Storm Charge as our anointment. This is still the most powerful anoint for this build, allowing us to not only get to 100% crit chance, but also a bunch of elemental damage. And then this amulet, you just want to look for good chaos res and attributes, and I like to put chaos quality on it to kind of get more chaos res. Now the rings, these are where most of your damage is. In fact, if I were to take these rings off, as you can see, my damage would lower dramatically. So I'm at like 189k tooltip, and then if I take these out, I guess I can't take them out. I could probably take out one and show just with one. So I almost lose half my damage here. I go from 189 to 108. So yeah, these rings are crazy for boosting your damage. Without them, I would be doing like 20% of the damage I currently do. And that is because the Tangle Tongue, like I said, doesn't have a lot of flat damage, so we need other sources of it. Now, the ideal prefixes here you're going to look for are just all the different elements. You want lightning, fire, and cold. Fizz does not roll as high as the other 3, but since we're converting all our damage, all our elemental damage into the elements equally, that's where Fizz, lightning, and lightning, cold, and fire is going to be the best at a high roll. So the ideal ring would be like, tier 9 fire, tier 9 cold, tier 9 lightning, damage to attacks, which is just, way too expensive. You'd have to, buy that ring for like a mirror. So don't worry about that. I crafted these rings myself, but, if I was to like price check these are probably both close to 100 divines worth. But I got lucky that, I know a little bit about crafting and I was able to make these for way cheaper than that. I've never actually had 100 divines at once. I always reinvest all the money I make from crafting back into crafting. And so, yeah, just, I mean, you either have to buy some like this at some point when you save up, or you'll, try your best to craft these. But yeah, and then the body armor, like I said, that's just a huge energy shield body armor, 1000 energy shield, and that is giving us all the spirit that we want. I'm at 260. You do not actually need that much. I'm just running a little, precision here in my combat frenzy. It's not really that important, not required. So really all you're trying to get to is about 250 if you want to run all the auras that I'm running. Now moving on to the boots, we're just looking for movement speed, some res, maybe some extra stun threshold. Being an energy shield build that has a low life pool, we want actually a lot of sources of extra stun threshold if we can get it. That'll help us in mapping to not feel so miserable to being stunned all the time. So I like that stat quite a lot. And then just, yeah, movement speed and energy shield here. The ingenuity, this is something I could probably upgrade, but because the rings is where most of your damage is, you want to get as good of an ingenuity as possible to scale that damage even further. And then, like I said, the gloves are what's enabling us to use Trinity and get, 78% more elemental damage, which is, of course, absurd. As well as these gloves also give 10% of each element, which is another 30%, so they're actually quite good even on their own. Now, moving on to the flask, for helping with the recovery, since we don't have the Leech Ascendancy from Amazon, I really like to use a Or Lost Resolve. This will give you some guard, as well as, if you wanted to, you could use Eternal Youth with this, and that would give you like 1300 energy shield back with one click. That's an option. I like to just attack once and then use it, because we're spending some of our life with Tangle Tongue, so we're not going to be on full life, allowing you to, use your flask. So basically I attack and then I click my flask while mapping, and that gives me that 1000 something guard to help, prevent me from taking too much damage. And with that mitigation, I don't actually need as much recovery in the end. Now for charms, I like Stun Charm, just again, because we're a energy shield build, we don't have a very big stun threshold. A Freeze Charm, because we don't have a very big ailment threshold. And then a Bleed Charm is really important, because bleeds now go straight through energy shield, and with this low amount of life, that can basically just straight up kill you if you're not, careful. So using a Bleed Charm here is very important for surviving those. And then finally, just random mana flask to help with mana sustain. That's not too important. The only thing that's important here is if you wanted to use the support gem called Ambrosia, then you would want a flask with high amount of charges, because it's going to convert your mana flask charges into damage. That's not it, Ambrosia. The only problem with this is damage as extra, and stacking damage of extra of one type is going to mess with your Trinity. So you don't want to be like all lightning, because then you're only going to gain lightning resonance for Trinity. So I don't really care for this. I'd rather have all three of my elements maxed out and be getting that 78% more elemental damage all the time. So yeah, don't worry too much about that. And then, yeah, that's pretty much the gear. I do have a weapon swap here into a wand that is just with some cast speed and int and some reduced attribute requirements so I can equip it. And then this shield here again, which is giving us increased skill effect duration. So this is allowing us to use a curse, and I guess you can use Orb of Storms on this weapon swap as well. So you want to make sure that if you're using Orb of Storms and a curse, that you set those to weapon set 2. And it'll basically increase the duration of those by a lot. And also paired with our passive skill tree, where we have this, weapon swap setup here, we're going to be able to buff up that curse to last a really long time and be really powerful, as well as with these increased skill effect duration points, we can increase the duration of the Orb of Storms. And this Orb of Storms is generating us rage, so on boss fights, that's going to be giving us more damage. So that paired with Infernal Cry here, with Raging Cry, we can basically get to 30 rage pretty much instantly on a boss fight to give us 30% more attack damage, which is really powerful. And yeah, as you can see, this Orb of Storms lasts quite a long time. It's like 20 seconds or so. So it should be up for pretty much the whole fight, especially if you're like me and you kill the boss in 4 seconds. Moving on, let me go over the skills now. We have Lightning Spear, of course, as our mapping skill. And we're using Martial Tempo, Fork, Deliberation, Volt, and Long Shot. Then when Stormlance, we're using a Scatter Shot over Abundance. This paired together allows us to throw 3 spears at a time, and reduce the detonation time from the normal 1.5 seconds down to 0.75 seconds, which meaning if we can sustain our charges and attack at about that rate, I'm a little slow right now at 0.87, but if you can attack at a rate of 0.75, then you can detonate 3 lances per attack, which is really powerful for boosting your damage, and in effect is like double the damage of not using Overabundance. Overextend here. This is just more crit damage, and because we're only using this on bosses, we don't care about this downside of being more susceptible to stuns, because on bosses, you're just going to be avoiding most attacks, ideally. Primal Armament, again, just more elemental damage. The reason why I'm not using stuff like Infusion is because if I were to use Lightning Infusion, that would mess with your it would of course mess with your Trinity, making your lightning higher than everything else, and then you're only going to gain lightning resonance. So you don't want to use stuff like lightning infusion. You want to use support gems that are just giving you more elemental damage in general, and that is what Primal Armament is doing. And then finally, close combat, like I said, because this is for bossing, you're going to be standing pretty much on top of the boss when you're using this, and you're going to get that full 25% more attack damage benefit. So these are the best support gems here on Stormlands. Orb of Storms, this is just giving us Font of Rage and Font of Mana for some rage generation and mana generation. Also, if you want, you could put Blind in this so that you can blind the boss, because you're going to be putting this underneath their feet. And then Persistence, again, just to make it last even longer. Now, Temporal Chains, this is currently bugged. It's not, it's not seeing the increased duration here from my passive tree, but this duration on this temporal chains is actually like 24 seconds. So it's a very long temporal chains, and that's why I didn't really feel like I needed to put persistence here. So I'm just using Heightened Curse, Curse Ground, and Ritualistic Curse. And again, you just put this down underneath the boss's feet, and you put the Orb of Storms down, these both. And you can either use Temp Chains or Enfeeble. If the fight lasts a little bit longer and you want to be able to tank some more hits, Enfeeble is going to be better for that 30% damage reduction. But if you just want to slow the boss down so that you can kill them before they, do too many of their skills, then Temporal Chains is the best. Now, moving on, Infernal Cry, like I said, you're going to want to use this as soon as the boss spawns to generate yourself some rage, and this will give you, I think it's like 15 or 20 rage, and so pairing that with the Orb of Storms, you'll be able to get to 30 rage immediately. And then our Cast and Crit, this is, super important for generating us Frenzy charges on bosses. You actually don't really need this while mapping outside of doing the map bosses, so there is a world where you could get by with just less Spirit than I have and only turn this on for bosses. But with Sniper's Mark, Impetus, and Ingenuity, you're going to be able to generate a bunch of charges, allowing us to sustain that high attack rate with Stormlance. And then finally, I've got Inspiration, just reducing the mana cost here on Sniper's Mark, and Energy Retention, which honestly is not really that required. These last two support gems are optional, but I have a 6 link here, so I might as well use them. Herald of Ice, so this is our full power Herald, and I'm using this with Elemental Focus, so that, it can't apply ailments anyway, so you might as well have it do more damage. And then Biting Frost, so it'll consume the freeze when it's killing enemies that are frozen, and it always is going to be killing enemies that are frozen because it needs to have them be frozen to even activate. So this is just a massive 50% more damage. And then we have Reach and Magnified Effect to increase the AoE. It's actually quite big here at 2.6 meters, so you get a lot of overlap while mapping, and it'll help a lot with clearing some of those weaker enemies on the outskirts that are not being killed by your Lightning Spear. And then finally, Execute. This is like the last damage increasing support I could find that was pretty good. There's some other options that are like 10% more damage that are always going to be active, but I felt like this for 50% more damage against low life enemies is probably the best option. And then finally, Combat Frenzy. This is our the way that we're generating charges while mapping when we're freezing enemies. And I do have that extra 10 Spirit for precision, but you don't really need this. I just might as well, use something since I've got 260. And then finally, Trinity. This is what's giving us like a majority of our damage, almost doubling our damage, giving us 78% more elemental damage. So the way that this works is it's 13% more elemental damage per 50 resonance, and you can have 100 resonance on each element. So that's 26% more elemental damage per element, adding up to a total of 78% more elemental damage if all 3 elements are capped out at full resonance. And the way that you scale this, of course, is you want to, put quality on it, but also these Lightning Mastery, Cold Mastery, and Fire Mastery support gems here are increasing its level because it is counted as, a skill of all 3 types. And so that's giving, I think it's like 1% more per one of these support gems. So that's really powerful there. And yeah, that is the total skill gem setup. Now the passive tree, I'm going for a setup that is energy shield focused. So I, path around here over to the energy shield and making sure to take all these crit chance notables. This mindful awareness, although we don't have any evasion rating, is still really good for how much energy shield it's giving. And then this section here, since we're freezing, shocking, and igniting and chilling, this has amazing 120% more elemental damage. It has like 100% uptime. We're taking all the crit stuff here. We're going up here, getting more energy shield. If you need int and you're struggling to get the int requirement to wear stuff like this body armor, which has a 157 int requirement, you have the option of taking Ingenuity, or you can take Ingenuity plus Insightfulness to get even more intelligence if that's what you're struggling with. And then I'm taking, of course, all the good crit points, Careful Assassin, Throat Seeker, all the points over here, Struck Through, Heartbreaking, and Heartstomper. And because I only want, 3 notables in range of my Against the Darkness, I don't want to do too much fire damage. I put it here, which is a perfect spot for it, giving me 12% more damage to extra fire and about 33 extra spirit. And then finally, I'm coming down here, taking some of the more powerful stuff, especially for a spear. All these spear points here are really strong. I'm taking more movement speed and attack speed here, as well as some shock magnitude. Stand and deliver, really powerful for bosses, especially since you're going to be standing within 2 meters. Catalysis, another really good point, which also gives some physical damage reduction. And then one of the best points for damage, if you're a crit build, is Cooked here, giving 60% increased critical damage with a small downside of reduced global defenses. So we're losing a little bit of energy shield, but that's okay. The amount of damage this gives you is definitely worth it. Now for the jewels, you want spell damage, like I said, because that's being converted into attack damage. And you want energy shield, of course, because we're playing an energy shield build. But beyond that, we also want crit damage because we have a 100% crit chance. And Tangle Tongue is doubling that crit damage with its 4 critical hits, affix here. So those are the 3 main ones you're looking for: spell damage, energy shield, and crit damage. But beyond that, I really like to gain additional stun threshold equal to maximum energy shield. This will make stuns a lot less common while mapping, and it'll make the build just feel a little bit smoother while mapping. And I have that on pretty much all of mine. Yep, they all have the exact same 4 mods: spell damage, crit damage, energy shield, and stun threshold, as energy shield as stun threshold. Now for mapping, like I said, you want to swap off stand and deliver and frazzled, and instead take def recovery and all 5 of these points up here. This is going to give you a bunch more stun recovery and an ailment or stun threshold and ailment threshold based on your energy shield. And this will make stuns and ailments a lot less common while mapping, and that's going to feel way better for mapping. Whereas these points here, you don't actually benefit that much from these while mapping because this has to be within 2 meters of an enemy. So that's mainly for bossing. And then Frazzled is giving you shock magnitude, but because we're one-shotting everything in maps, we're not really hitting them when they have a shock on them, so that's not too valuable either. So yeah, we're pretty much just one-shotting everything before it gets a chance to even be shocked. So yeah, definitely drop those for the other points when mapping. But for bossing, this is the ideal tree in my opinion. This will give you the most damage. All right, so I'll be showing you guys a Breachstone here with this build, and I've kind of showed the clearing potential here as well as the bossing potential. So, of course, starting out, we have the clear here. As you can see, it's just as good as the Lightning Spear build, except now we've got Herald of Ice explosions going off, which are helping a lot with the shotgunning of the enemies. And it's very powerful clearing, and of course, we're going to be trying to get to the boss here as fast as possible, so I can show that off. But yeah, very, very good for mapping like this. And I can just use my flask. Every time I attack, I have the option of clicking my flask if I want, because we're spending a little bit of life every time we attack with Tangle Tongue. And so I'm able to use my, or Lost Resolve here to then get some guard. And that's another added defensive layer, basically adding like an extra 1200, effective hit pool onto the top of what I already have, which is like, 5k energy shield and 1300 life. So we're actually sitting while mapping, if you're going to be doing this, we're sitting close to like, I don't know, like 8k effective hit pool, which is a ton. And yeah, so this is kind of how it goes. The energy shield recharge should start here in a second. Because the guard is taking damage before your energy shield, you can actually recharge your energy shield while the guard is up. So that's a nice way to get your energy shield back, is just make sure you use your flask, and you're going to be able to recharge after a little while. And yeah, we're just continuing on. I've done a ton of these Breachstones. I don't know how many times I've killed Rezesh tier 4, but probably like 200-300 times at least, maybe more. And as you can see, here's my Trinity. As you can see, all 3 elements are pretty much built up for the most part, and that is what's giving us that like 78% more elemental damage. We always have charges because we're freezing, and that's generating us charges with Combat Frenzy. And then, we get like 3 charges instantly there. From Serpent's Egg, and I guess our cast on crit also can generate charges if you have that active as well. So you get plenty of charges for everything you need. And yeah, let's just show the boss now and kind of show what I would do if I was fighting him for the first time, and kind of the combo here. So the main thing is you're going to want to put down your Orbistorms and your Temp Chains underneath his feet, and then as soon as he spawns, I'm going to go ahead and use Infernal Cry to get all my rage, and then of course just right click and he'll die. You'll see. So I'm going to put my Orbistorms down. We're generating rage. We're at like 12 rage here. Put down the curse. Make sure to use my war cry here. I'm at 30 rage, and then I just attack and watch him melt. And yeah, that's tier 4 Zesht in about 5 seconds, as you can see. As you can see, it is quite insane how much damage this build can do here. And of course, I have a full written guide here on Mobalytics that I'll be linking in the description for you guys to follow along with. And this is going to go over everything in a little bit more detail, which is probably the best resource to follow if you plan on replicating and making this build yourself. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the build, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.